Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hay rides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188. Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden and increase the curb appeal of your yard. I'm your host, Misty Kacheris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. You know, one of the most popular pastimes for people throughout the world is watching birds. Whether you live in a home, apartment, condo, whether you have a yard, a porch, or a patio, you can attract birds to your property year-round. And today we're going to talk about those birds that stay around your home here in Northern Virginia and what special care you can give them. So I hope you enjoy our show today. Enjoy your backyard birds this winter. Now you may find these statistics really interesting because according to the U.S. Department of Interior, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Department of Commerce, and U.S. Census Bureau, more than 57 million households here in the United States feed backyard birds, and they'll spend more than $4 billion annually on bird food. There are numerous studies on why we love to see these birds and why we feed them. Feeding birds helps us stay connected with nature. It increases our feelings of happiness, and it improves our ability to relax. Just think about it. I have several feeders in my yard and can spend hours at my dining room table watching their antics at the feeders. At Burke Nursery and Garden Center, I recently taught a seminar on winter birds, and Dave, who attended the seminar, asked a great question at that time. He said, if we have natural food for birds, should we also have feeders out for the birds? Well, studies indicate that birds do prefer natural food. They'll go over and take natural food way over anything that they do in feeders. But what happens is if you put out feeders, especially in the winter months, you're doing several things for your birds. First of all, you're increasing their winter survival, because not all birds can find the food that they normally would during the summer and the spring and the fall months. The other is that it also increases the bird population. So there you have it. You're helping with the bird population, you're helping with their winter survival. And as I mentioned, it doesn't matter whether you live in a condo or a home or an apartment building. If you put out a feeder, the birds will come. As a matter of fact, one of my friends lives on the 7th floor of a condo, and she puts out hummingbird feeders when they're here in season, and she gets hummingbirds coming to her 7th floor condo, which is very exciting. Now, Virginia Tech has many different articles and research on birds and what birds do to help the environment. So if you're interested in reading any of these, you can go to vtnews.vt.edu/articles and just Google researchers who study people who feed birds into their search engine. You'll come up with some pretty interesting articles. Or if you can't find the articles, then what to do is just email me at misty@burkenursery.com, and I'll send you the link. Well, let's get to the fun part. And that fun part is, what are the birds that you're going to see in your backyard this winter, how to attract them, and how to make sure that they're safe within your area. There's 3 critical things the birds need. They need food, they need water, and they need protection. And so when you want to put out your feeders, and I'll talk more about these feeders, but be aware that it'll take birds about 1 to 2 weeks to find the feeders and come to the feeders. And then when one bird finds the feeder, then the other birds will definitely broadcast that information to each other, and next thing you know, the flock is there. The other that I recommend is that if you do go away on a vacation for a week or two, please do not keep empty feeders up. Take down the feeders, because it's better that the birds associate feeders with food versus feeders with no food. So what is the first bird that you see? And my first bird that is really my favorite is the tufted titmouse, also sometimes called the tufted titmice for plural. And they're very small little birds. They're gray, they have a crest. Sometimes they have that same kind of crest that the cardinals have. And they like to hide their seed. And they also like to flock together with chickadees. And so if you want them to come to your feeder, they're very happy coming to your feeder. But also, if you have a lot of oak trees in your yard, you'll find that they like to come to your yard because they love acorns. And they'll eat sunflower, they'll eat safflower, they'll eat Niger seed, they'll eat mealworms, and they'll eat suet as well. The next bird that's very common at your feeder is the chickadee. And you can recognize the chickadee by its call, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee. And this chickadee is a very tiny bird, maybe about 3 inches small. It has a black cap with white on its side and black under its neck, and the rest is white. And it loves nest boxes. And it loves nest boxes, especially if you put shredded wood into your nest boxes. And these are birds that hide their food everywhere. So what you'll do is you'll see them come to the feeder, take all the food, and fly off. And what they're doing is that they're hiding their bird food, and they're saying, I'll remember where it is, and I'll be back. Chickadees are definitely a bird that you want in your yard. Anybody that has a garden knows about the horror of aphids, and chickadees love to eat aphids. And the other is that they're very trusting of human beings. In honesty, I don't recommend this, but basically what they'll do is they can learn to, you can start putting food on your hand, and they'll learn to trust you and actually eventually eat food out of your hand. But like I said, I don't normally recommend that because they are still wild animals. And then, of course, you have the northern cardinals. And I couldn't find a picture of the cardinals together, but everybody knows the male cardinal, bright red. And then the female cardinal is more of a tan. She has a little red on her crest, a little red on her sides. And this is the state bird of Virginia. It's such a popular bird. It's also the state bird of Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia. And they mate for life. But funny story, I have a customer who came into the nursery not that long ago, this past mating season. And what the customer said was, I cannot stop the male cardinal from attacking my rear view mirrors on my car. The cardinal was seeing his own image in the mirrors. He thought it was another cardinal coming out for his territory. He just kept attacking, and I said, the only thing you can do is cover those mirrors until mating season is over, because usually once mating season is done, then they stop being so territorial. Needless to say, they do like to hide in vines, they like hedges. So if you want to plant something in your yard, then some kind of creeping vine is a good thing to plant because they like that. The other is they like to nest in small shrubs. So boxwood shrubs are a good place for them to nest, and you may want to consider actually building, or not building, but putting down boxwoods. And then they have several broods in one year. So what that means is most of these birds don't come to the same bird's nest. There is an exception, but most of these birds will only use the nest once for the season and then abandon it. Well, because the cardinals have more than one brood for a year, then what happens is that they will reuse that nest until the season is done, and they're done for the season. My favorite bird is the American goldfinch. And again, I don't have one picture of the two of them, but the male is totally yellow, and the male has a black cap and the black wings, and then the female is almost an olive green with very, I call her old gold. A lot of people think that the American goldfinch migrates, but really what happens is that the male loses his yellow, and he actually looks a lot like the female during the winter months, so people just figured that they're not in town. The other is that these birds are the only true vegetarian birds. All the other birds, including the house finch, which is quasi-vegetarian, will still feed their young worms or other insects, and the cardinals, the golden finches won't. They'll actually just feed the plant materials. So what you want to do is, if you're going to purchase any seed for them, then you want to purchase the Niger seed, or sometimes it's called thistle seed. Also, I recommend that you plant black-eyed Susans, which are perennials, or purple coneflowers, again, which are perennials, and do not deadhead them in the winter months, because the American goldfinches will actually eat their seeds throughout the winter months. And then finally, what's very important, unlike the other birds, these birds breed in late summer. That means they don't have their babies until October, and so they really need to have some nest boxes, because if we get an early frost, sometimes those eggs will freeze and those eggs just won't hatch out. And then the house finches. House finches are seen everywhere. And to think, until about the 1940s, the house finches were only found on the West Coast and in Mexico. And then one day somebody decided it's good to sell them as Hollywood birds on the East Coast, and let's see what happens. Well, what happened was the federal government found out, and over 100,000 house finches were released into the wild on the East Coast, and they're now all doing very, very well. This is where you see the male will have red and the red face, and then the gray mottling, and then the female is basically with the gray mottling. And they also like their Niger seed, and they'll also actually drink hummingbird water when they want. Finally, I'd like to talk about the Carolina wren. And the Carolina wren has over 1,000 different calls, very coquettish, big long beak with a little feathered tail, and it'll nest anywhere. It prefers gardens. It bonds for only the mating season, but what a display. It will build nests anywhere, and it will build 4 or 5 nests just to see if it can attract a female. It prefers insects, it'll eat snails, it'll eat lizards, tree frogs, and it even prefers what is known as mealworm. So often you'll see it come to your feeder in the winter months, and then what happens is that it's just tossing out all the seed, because what it's really looking for is that it's looking for what I call insects within the seeds. I won't have time to go through all the birds that stay around, but there is one more bird that I'd like to mention. And this is actually, well, I keep saying my favorite bird. I guess I have a lot of favorite birds. This is the Downy Woodpecker. And this is the Downy Woodpecker daddy, actually at my suet feeder outside my home. And on top of that suet feeder is the juvenile, the baby. And the baby, which is not that unusual with the young fledglings because of the way their feathers are, looks larger than the daddy, but the fledgling is learning the ways of the suet, as I say. And the female looks like the Downy Woodpecker, except that she does not have red on the back. And this is a very, very small woodpecker. It's about 6 to 7 inches in length. And there is another woodpecker called the hairy woodpecker. And the downy and hairy look very similar to each other. The only difference is that the hairy woodpecker is actually 9 inches in length. And so the downy woodpecker loves ants, loves berries, loves poison ivy, loves even eating sap. Well, I forgot to mention this about the cardinals too. Cardinals love poison ivy berries. So when the winter months come and you have a poison ivy patch, and then it comes springtime and you notice that your patch has grown like triple in size, you can either blame the woodpeckers, like the downy, or you can blame the cardinals because they've been busy eating that poison ivy berry during the winter months. And so then obviously they're spreading the poison ivy around. The other why you'd really like to have these woodpeckers is that if you grow corn, they'll eat the corn earworms. They eat bark beetles, could be a problem on azaleas, so that helps. They eat scale, which can be a problem on many different types of shrubs, and they like to nest in old trees. Well, that's some of my favorite birds, and I could go on and on talking about 3 or 4 more birds that are around. But what I'd like to do is talk about some of the things that you can do. First of all, putting up feeders. Let me say, before I go to feeders, first of all, let's talk about water. Water is a very important component to the birds, especially water in the winter months. And it's hard for birds to find water in the winter months. So I have 2 different types of bird feeders. I actually have what I call a pot tray, and I'll put a rock in the middle of this, and then I use this as a bird feeder on my patio. And then I have a cement bird feeder out in the front yard, bird bath. So this is a bird bath. And so I'll also put a bird bath. I have a cement bird bath in the front yard. Now, in the front yard, I wouldn't recommend doing this with a plastic bird bath, but you can purchase de-icers specifically intended for bird baths. And what's good about that is then these de-icers don't turn on until temperatures fall below 35 degrees. You put them in your ceramic or cement bird bath, and it'll keep the water fresh and it'll keep the water wet so that the birds can get that water in the winter months when they really need it. And if you're worried, in the summer months, change the water every 2 days or add what is known as mosquito bits into your water. This will kill the larvae of mosquitoes, and it's BT, which is an organic product. So the feeders that you want to consider, I just brought a small one, but the larger hole feeders are for your standard birds. And so that could be any kind of bird mix, whether you want to get a nut and berry bird mix, whether you want to get a safflower bird mix. The other is that these two are Niger feeders. And Niger feeders have small little holes because the Niger is very, very small, and you don't want that to fall through those large holes. So you need a special feeder. And this one is known as an upside down feeders. The other is a right side up feeder. And the goldfinch doesn't care whether it's upside down or right side up. It likes both feeders, and it's very happy. And then, of course, you have your suet feeder. What's good about a suet feeder like this is that this is actually better for the large birds like your downy. Blue jays will come to a suet feeder. Cardinals will go to a suet feeder. And pileated woodpeckers will come to a suet feeder. And then another good feeder, but you have to be careful with this good feeder because squirrels can get to it as well. But this is a good feeder in that it is a tray feeder. So your large birds, whether they're your mourning doves, whether they're your cardinals, they like this because they can rest and they know they're safe. And doves especially, mourning doves especially, like these type of feeders because they're ground feeders. Well, as I've been speaking about the different birds, and I'm talking about the food, the need for food, the need for water, and also the need for hiding spaces. One of the things I talk about is how berries are very important to birds. Nuts are very important to birds. I won't have time to go throughout the entire list on this show, so if you're interested in getting a list of what type of plants, trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals would work in your yard to attract the birds, then please feel free to email me at misty@burkenursery.com. It's wonderful having birds in your backyard or even your front yard, and I'd really like to take the time to share some of the trees or some of the shrubs or even some of the perennials and annuals that you might want to plant. Of course, oak trees are a big thing. Oak trees are amazing because most birds love the acorns. And it's actually rather cute seeing something like a little chickadee or a little titmice, which are only 2 or 3 inches long, come by, take an acorn and just take off somewhere. Beech trees and birch trees are loved not only for their fruit, but also, especially the birch trees have softer wood, so that helps in the nesting area. And dogwood trees. How many people realize that dogwood trees have berries? A lot of people, we have 2 types of dogwood trees in this area. We have the Floridia, which is basically our native dogwood tree, and then we have the Korean dogwood, and both those berries are very, very good. And the birds love the native dogwood berries. And then the southern magnolia, another native plant that these have cones. The berries are in the cones of the northern magnolia. And it's fascinating watching birds go there and try to pull those cones out. And then, of course, conifer trees. And conifer trees are cone-bearing trees. So that's just spruce or maybe your hemlock or your pine tree, because those pine cones or any of those cones provide a lot of nourishment. Now, shrubs, plant yourself a lilac shrub if you really want to attract a lot of cardinals, because for some reason, at least in my neighborhood, they seem to feel that the lilac shrubs will give them protection. And then, of course, there's the winterberry, which the female winterberry, but you need to have a male as well. And this produces the berries all season long. Even the Japanese barberries have berries that your birds like. And then there's also the red osier or red twig dogwood, which is a shrub. But again, it's a wonderful shrub that's branches turn red after it loses it, that has red branches after it loses its leaves in the winter months, and makes a phenomenal statement. And then your perennials. I already talked about the importance of black-eyed Susans and purple cone flowers. And then daylilies. A lot of people don't realize how important daylilies are to birds because of the seed pods that they have. And then, of course, you have your tick seed and your which is also known as coreopsis. And then the sunflower, the annuals, always the sunflower, or the lantana. The lantana also attracts hummingbirds, so definitely. The zinnias, I stopped planting those only because the crows kept eating my zinnia flowers, and I got tired of the crows deadheading them. But that's okay. It all worked out fine. So these are just some of the perennials and annuals that you can consider. I hope that you enjoyed learning about birds and how to attract them to your yard. I'm your host, Misty Kacheris, and I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, as well as the October month-long Pumpkin Playground Festival featuring hay rides and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.